Aloha, everyone. So it's now been more than 2 years and 8 months since the fire in Lahaina, and it's been over 5 months since my last full drone tour showing the town's progress. And since today is the first nice day that we've had after a series of storms here on Maui, I figured I'd get the drone up in the air and show you what Lahaina town looks like right now so you can see it for yourself. Let's go take a look. The first thing I have to point out is just how green the West Maui mountains are after all the rain that we received over the past month. Before the recent storms, we had been in drought conditions for several years, so it is refreshing to see the moisture return. However, it would have been nice if the rain was more spread out over time. So as we fly over town, I'm curious to see what kind of impact, if any, the storms had on Lahaina. As I always do in my Lahaina drone updates, we're going to start on the far south end of Lahaina town in the Puamana area. The flight path we'll be taking is going to follow the coastline from the south end of Lahaina to the north end before we circle back a little bit further inland so you can see the whole town. We'll also take a separate flight that'll follow Lahainaluna Road all the way to the top of the burn zone and back down the hill following the Kahoma stream. Okay, we're about to fly over the start of Front Street on the south end, and we're entering into a single-family home neighborhood. This is where we're going to start to see a lot of the residential structures being rebuilt. So while we're here, let's go over some of the permitting and rebuild statistics that are shown on the Maui Recovers website. As of April 17th, 2026, a total of 168 residential homes have completed construction. There's another 305 homes that are currently being built, and on top of that, another 168 residential permits are being processed. So the progress on the residential rebuild has been steady. Coming up on the left-hand side of the screen, you see a mid-rise building that's right on the beachfront. That is Lahaina Shores condominium complex. And if you've been watching my previous videos, you already know that Lahaina Shores has officially reopened for business, and the community is looking great. Okay, we're now approaching the Lahaina Harbor area, and we will fly right over the Banyan Tree as we head back towards Front Street. Now, this area has actually been open to the public for quite a while, and I've noticed that some people are surprised to hear that. The harbor itself is open to limited commercial activities with several boat excursions leaving daily, and while the Banyan Tree Park is closed off to the public by a fence, you can walk all the way around it. We're now in the commercial area over Front Street, and we're about to fly past the area that held the Wharf Cinema Center and the Pioneer Inn. Now, as nice as it's been to see the steady progress with the residential rebuild, you're about to see that there hasn't been much progress in the downtown area of Front Street at all. And this section of town is still closed to the public nearly 3 years after the fire. That being said, it looks like the sidewalks have been recently poured, there are new streetlights, and I know the county has done some work to reinforce the seawall. They also recently released draft guidelines to help streamline and jumpstart the more complex rebuilding of this iconic Front Street area and the rest of the commercial district. So I am cautiously optimistic that we'll start to see some progress in this area in the coming months. But if we don't start to see some progress in that regard, I think it's time to start asking the questions, why is it taking so long, and where is the sense of urgency? Okay, we're now coming up on the intersection at Baker Street and Front Street, which is pretty much the end of the commercial district and the start of another residential area. And you will notice that one of the lots on the ocean side of Front Street has already started framing, which is another good sign of progress as a lot of the oceanfront homes have been delayed by an extra layer of permits for a special management area. Okay, we're now flying right over the top of Lahaina's Baby Beach, and we'll continue our flight path along the coastline. We're coming up on the Lahaina Jodo Mission, and past that you can see the Mala Wharf and boat ramp, and way off in the distance at the top of the screen you can see Kanapali. By the way, don't forget to hit the like button if you appreciate these updates, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more updates in the future. And if you really want to support the work that I do on these videos, consider joining as a member. I'll share a link to the membership options in the description below. We're now passing the Kahoma stream and starting to fly over a portion of Front Street that survived the fire. Starting with the old Lahaina Lua on the ocean side of Front Street, the Cannery Mall on the mountain side, and several restaurants like Mala, Star Noodle, Honu, and the brand new Coco Deck Lahaina open for business in this area. Okay, we're now entering back into a more residential area, and the mid-rise building that's on the ocean side of Front Street is Lahaina Roads. Now, this portion of town was slow to get started with the residential rebuild because of the extra layer of permits that I mentioned before. But as we cross the highway and fly into the Wahikuli neighborhood, you'll see a lot more progress with homes being built on the hillside. Now, in past videos, we discussed the fire lawsuit settlement, and I was hopeful that fire survivors would start to see the first payments at the beginning of this year. Unfortunately, that did not happen yet, but here's the latest updates. All the way back in August of 2024, a $4 billion global settlement was reached among the defendants who were deemed to be responsible for the devastating fire. However, distribution of funds from the settlement to fire survivors was delayed by insurance companies seeking to recover money they had paid out to fire victims in the immediate aftermath of the disaster. This legal concept, known as subrogation, allows insurance companies to seek reimbursement from parties found responsible for the damage. But critics warned that allowing insurers access to the settlement fund would deplete it before fire victims even received any compensation. I'll share more on the fire lawsuit settlement in a second here, but I should mention that we're now coming to the end of the burn zone, so we're going to turn around and start heading back in the other direction, but this time a little bit further up the hillside to give you an even better perspective of town. And you will notice that from this angle, you can see just how many homes have already been built and how many are currently under construction. To me, it looks like there's been a ton of progress since my last video update. Okay, I want to circle back to discussing the latest updates on the wildfire lawsuit settlement. Well, earlier this year, in February of 2026, the Hawaii Supreme Court ruled unanimously that insurance companies could not join the case as active parties. Several companies continued to appeal that ruling, but just a couple of weeks ago, the last remaining insurance company that was holding up the process withdrew its appeal, which clears another major hurdle. The next step will be for a judge to determine the attorney fees, and then the court-appointed special masters will begin issuing settlement offers to the more than 21,000 individual claimants. Payments will be distributed in 4 annual installments, and for some fire survivors, the final payment will not be received until 2029. That's more than 6 years after the fire. As we come to the end of the Wahikuli neighborhood, I want to spin the camera to look up the hillside so you can see the brand new affordable housing community that was just completed. And as we continue to spin, I'll point out that the color-filled buildings are tiny homes that are being used as temporary housing for fire survivors. Okay, from here, we're going to jump back across the highway and fly right over the top of the Cannery Mall. Now, as you can see, the parking lot is full, and the mall is thriving with several new shops and a new food court. Just past the Cannery Mall, you'll see some smaller commercial buildings that have just completed construction. And in those buildings, you'll find businesses like Bank of Hawaii, Fork and Salad, which is a healthy food option, and Lahaina Jewelry, just to name a few. Okay, and now we're crossing back over the Kahoma stream and entering my old neighborhood, Kahoma Village. Almost all the buildings that were lost in the fire in Kahoma Village have already been rebuilt. And on a more personal note, we're about to fly over my house that we were living in at the time of the fire. And up until recently, we had been renting our Kahoma Village house to a family that lost their home in the fire. Well, they since moved on to a more permanent solution, so we're looking for the next great tenants who want to be in the middle of town and walking distance to Baby Beach. So if you know anyone that's looking for a rental in Lahaina, let them know they can reach out to me directly and I'll connect them with my property manager. I'll also share a video walkthrough of the house in the near future, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Okay, from here, we're going to jump ahead a little ways and we'll start a new flight where we're going to follow Lahainaluna Road all the way up the hillside into the Lahainaluna Neighborhood. We're starting from the coastline again, and we're now flying over the area that held popular restaurants like Kimo's, Cheeseburger in Paradise, and the Lahaina Yacht Club. We're now coming over the top of Lahainaluna Road and flying over the area that held the Plantation Inn prior to the fire. Okay, we're now coming up on the old Pioneer Mill smokestack, and just past the smokestack is the area where they collected burnt cars and broke down large pieces of concrete and steel from the ash and debris removal. As you can see, the area has now been completely cleaned up. We're now coming up on the Lahainaluna Neighborhood, and notice the wooden poles that are holding up the overhead power lines in this area. It was poorly maintained power lines that were knocked down by strong winds that was another major factor that caused the huge fire. In fact, it was a down power line in this actual neighborhood that created the initial spark that started the fire. Well, we recently received some really good news in that regard, as it was announced that Hawaii Electric does plan to bury power lines in this area. Approximately 2.5 miles of power lines along Lahainaluna Road are going to be placed underground. We're now approaching the highest point that was affected by the fire in Lahainaluna. So we're going to turn around and start heading back down the hillside. This time, we're going to follow the Kahoma Stream. Oh, and straight ahead on the other side of the Kahoma Stream, you see another mid-rise building. That building is an affordable apartment complex that was lost during the fire, and it has now been completely rebuilt. We're now flying over a neighborhood called Kahoma Homes, not to be confused by Kahoma Village, which we discussed earlier in this video. And as you can see for yourself, this particular neighborhood might have the highest concentration of homes already rebuilt. To give you a point of reference, on the other side of the Kahoma Stream right here is where you'll find the Emerald Plaza Commercial Center. And in the middle of the screen, we're coming up on a condo community known as Opukea at Lahaina. Now, Opukea did lose a few of its buildings to the fire, but as you can see, they're already making good progress on rebuilding. We'll take a closer look at Opukea in a few seconds here, but first we're going to veer over and we're going to fly over a townhome community known as Hoonanea. Hoonanea is also making really good progress in rebuilding the structures that it lost in the fire. By the way, if you'd like to receive even more consistent updates on Lahaina's recovery, feel free to also follow me on my Instagram and Facebook pages. That's where I share more short-form updates that you just won't see here on YouTube. I'll share links to them in the description below. We're now flying right over the top of Limahana Place and passing the area that held the Mind's Eye Interior and the Pizza Hut and Taco Bell building that was right on the highway. This is where you would have found the popular dive bar called the Slime Mongoose and the pawn shop as well. And finally, at the end of the cul-de-sac is where the Sugarcane Train food truck park was located prior to the fire. Okay, this is where we're going to jump back across the highway and we'll finish the tour by following Wainae Street all the way to the south end of Lahaina. The building we're flying over right now is the McDonald's building, and on the far right-hand corner of the screen is where the Foodland grocery store was. We just crossed over the intersection of Wainae and Lahainaluna, and we're coming up on the Maria Lanakila Catholic Church. Just past the church is the intersection at Dickinson Street and Waianae. And just past the intersection on the left-hand side of the screen is where the Aina Nalu condo complex was located prior to the fire. The big square wall in the middle of the screen now is where the old Lahaina prison once stood before the fire, and the prison is another historical site that Lahaina Restoration Foundation plans to restore in the near future. Okay, as we come to the end of the tour, let me know in the comment section what you think of the progress now that you've been able to see it with your own eyes. To me personally, it looks like a lot of good things are happening in town, and I'm very hopeful that we can continue to maintain and even increase the pace of reconstruction. With that being said, I am disappointed that the commercial areas on Front Street have not even begun to rebuild yet. It's always my goal to keep it 100% real with everyone that watches my videos, so if I'm completely honest, I do have mixed emotions after seeing the progress in this video. I'm very happy to see so many homes are already being rebuilt, but it is clear that we still have a lot of work ahead of us. On a positive note though, after reviewing the footage, it does look like Lahaina survived the recent storms much better than other parts of Maui, where we saw significant flooding. If you haven't already, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more updates in the future, and share this video with anyone else you know who would also like to stay informed on what's actually happening here in Lahaina. I hope to see you all on the next video. Aloha.